Dunkirk is directed by Christopher Nolan and is about the remarkable true story of the Dunkirk evacuations that happened at the start of World War II. Now, usually once I've seen a movie, within about a day or so I have all my thoughts and opinions of said movie ready to go for a review the next day. With Dunkirk, it's been a little bit trickier because even though I know how I feel about the movie, I just feel that no matter what I say in this review, I'm going to be offending about 50% of you. I'm going to be honest, I've seen this movie twice now, and the first time I saw it, I really enjoyed it. And the second time I saw it, I thought it was even better, and I absolutely loved this movie. But I just want to say one thing. You could argue that I'm a Nolan fanboy, because yes, I love pretty much all of his movies. But that's not the case. Because I went into Dunkirk not expecting another Christopher Nolan movie. I went into it expecting to see what happened at Dunkirk. I'm expecting to see a movie about that event. Unlike usual, I'm going to talk about what I didn't like about the movie now at the start to get it out of the way. And to be honest, there wasn't much I didn't like about this movie. There is one nitpick I have, and it is in regards to the editing and the perspectives you see in the movie. Now, in this movie, you see the events of Dunkirk from 3 different perspectives. From the soldiers on the beach waiting to be rescued, from the RAF pilots in the sky, and the civilians who are on their small little boats coming to rescue the soldiers at Dunkirk. And I really do like the way it was handled, because it makes everything just feel a lot bigger of a scale, and it just goes to show how many different areas and aspects were at play during this catastrophic event. But that being said, the way it's edited can be slightly confusing at times. You see, the way Nolan goes about showing these perspectives is in a very non-linear way. And the idea of that, I think, works really well for the sake of this movie. But the way it's handled is a little bit choppy at times. For example, 1 minute you might be seeing Tom Hardy in his Spitfire shooting down other German planes in the middle of the daytime. And then it immediately cuts to, say, Fionn Whitehead and Harry Styles' character on the beach trying to escape a burning, sinking ship in the middle of the night time. And it's these contrasts of time and place that can kind of throw you off once or twice. But luckily, you see something that then pops up in the film that you immediately remember, and then you're back on track. It's those kind of things that do throw you off ever so slightly, but it's not that big of a deal. It's honestly something I can look over, but if I had to nitpick, that's probably the biggest nitpick I have. Apart from that though, everything else I have to say about this movie is positive. And the first thing I have to mention is the cinematography. I can't remember the name of the guy who is the cinematographer, but he worked with Nolan on his last movie, Interstellar. And the cinematography in that movie was fantastic. But here, I think he outdoes himself. The imagery in this movie is both epic and haunting at the same time. And this gorgeous cinematography, blended with Christopher Nolan's amazing direction, makes for one of the most intense cinematic experiences I've ever had. Because one thing that I was worried about going into this movie was the whole rating thing. Because most war movies I've seen have been a 15 or have been rated R if you live in America. And that's usually because they're full of gore and blood and guts. But in this movie, it's rated 12, or if you live in America, PG-13. And I think it works absolutely fantastically, because what Nolan does is, instead of going for the very easy, gory, bloody route, he instead makes you feel like you're there with these soldiers, and puts you in the middle of it, which is a very intense situation. And he makes the most out of this event to squeeze every little bit of intensity and suspense that he can find. And this is honestly one of the most suspenseful movies I've ever seen. I had my heart in my mouth the entire time. And I'm going to say this. my heart has never beaten as violently as it was whilst watching Dunkirk. And I've got to say, the acting in this movie across the board is absolutely fantastic. Tom Hardy, Kenneth Branagh, Mark Rylance, Cillian Murphy, they are all fantastic in this movie. But the ones that really surprised me were the younger, more unknown actors. And I'm so glad Christopher Nolan decided to do that. Go with unknown actors, because it really adds to the authenticity that these are just young soldiers caught in the middle of a complete and utter disaster. Fionn Whitehead I thought was very good. Harry Styles, you know, the guy from One Direction, he was actually really good and one of the best things about this movie. And everyone in the movie on an acting standpoint is very, very good as well. I also really liked Christopher Nolan's decision not to put that much dialogue in the movie, because what he was pretty much aiming for is to let the imagery speak for itself. And in terms of a visual movie, this movie is just a visual, like, experience. And that, the haunting imagery blended with the amazing sound design that honestly caught me off guard a few times, honestly puts you in the moment and feels like you're on the beach with these soldiers. Okay, so the one thing I keep hearing people say about Dunkirk is the lack of character development and relatability to these characters, which I can understand for a movie like Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge. But here, I don't think it's even needed, and I think I completely understand what Christopher Nolan was going for. You don't really need the moments, because in every war movie you get that one moment where they're talking about their loved ones and you get to connect to the character, which means if something bad happens to them later in the movie, you feel emotion. Christopher Nolan does not do that in this movie. Instead, what he shows you is a situation with people in it rather than people within the situation. And I think it works absolutely brilliantly here, because like I said, instead of making you feel for a certain character, what he instead does is put you, the audience, in that situation along with all these other characters, making you immediately empathise with every single one of them, because you're looking at this chaotic and disastrous event happen alongside them. And I think he absolutely nailed what he was trying to go for. And it's this reason alone that makes me very frustrated when I hear people saying there's not enough character development and you don't get to know the characters that well, which makes it really crap. They're completely missing the point. Nolan was trying to encapsulate the event and show you what actually happened, making you feel for the characters that way rather than the cliched way that you're used to seeing. And I've got to say it, Hans Zimmer's score is absolutely fantastic. It's almost as haunting as some of the imagery in this movie. It just builds and builds and builds, but never actually reaches that climax or crescendo you're expecting. And the way it's blended in with a constant ticking clock throughout the entire score makes for an incredibly suspenseful and tense score that works perfectly with this movie. Because every time I hear the music outside of the movie, it honestly gives me goosebumps and puts me right back into the movie, even though I'm not watching it. So, with all that being said, I'm going to give Dunkirk a 10 out of 10. And I know I said there were a few little nitpicks and problems that I had with this movie. But let's face it, no movie ever is literally perfect. Even movies in the past that I've said are flawless or perfect, such as Whiplash and Inglourious Bastards, if I looked at them closer and I had the time to analyse them more, yeah, I could probably find flaws and nitpicks for hours. The reason I love those movies so much, and the reason why I think they're perfect, is because they perfectly approach what they're doing in the best possible way and do it as best as they could have. And whatever those movies do well is enough to counteract the bad things about it. And that's exactly what I think about Dunkirk. even though it does have a couple of little nitpicking flaws here and there, I think the positives absolutely outweigh the negatives. So guys, that was my review of Dunkirk. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the video, then give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye.